Okay, it is Grand Final Day 2024. In the last 4 years, I've made it a bit of a tradition to do a video on the morning of Grand Final Day, which for me, of course, being here in the UK, it is still Friday afternoon, but I have to get up at 5 for this game, maybe 4 actually, and I will be streaming later today on the True Footy YouTube channel. So being in the UK for Grand Final Day is a slightly different experience, as you can imagine. The whole game, it's done by about 8:30 in the morning. And then, for me, for the last few years, since I started True Footy as a content creator, it's become, Grand Final Day has increasingly become, just a work day. And I'm okay with that, to be honest. Prior to starting True Footy, it probably used to be about friends and beers. And then from 2019 onward, when we started live streaming it, I became increasingly keen to stay sober, other than 2020, which was a big exception. We had about 43,000 views on our live stream, and everyone except me in the room was shit-faced, and I was kind of okay still. And since then, it's become a day where I've wanted my wits about me, so I'm going to do the live stream. Hope to see you guys flit in and out or stay for the whole game. That would be cool. It's weird. I think I've spent... this is my 31st Grand Final Day, and I reckon I've been in Australia for about 15 of those. It's also the last game I'm going to watch here in the UK before I move back to Australia at the end of the year. And one thing I'll say, while I like that this is a work day for me, I think, to be honest, getting on the beers and drinking through it, I think back to 2017, that game's kind of a blur for me because I thought too much about the party and it took away from the idea that I just love Grand Final Day. And it gets lost a little bit. And in particular this year, I've been guilty of it too. This week, I've been making a lot of trade content. As a content creator, I've got to balance Grand Final content and trade content with, what the audience wants to see. And you may or may not have noticed that just the tip for the Grand Final was my least viewed video a week, or second least. But I haven't forgotten about it. I've been doing my thing and wanted to do this second video as another way of talking about the game before it all kicks off. And one thing that I do kind of regret being over here in the UK is that I'll miss a lot of the pre-game stuff. And for me, that's part of the magic. It's the anticipation of turning on the TV basically as soon as you wake up, because in Perth, where I'm from, the bounce is at 12:30. So you wake up in the morning and you flick on the TV and it's Grand Final Day, and you get shots of players still in their training tees, or they'll be out in the field and you get the countdown clock saying like 2 hours to bounce down. You see like club legends talking about the game prior to it, and you see the trophy for the first time with the 2 sets of colours of ribbons on either side of the handle, knowing that by the end of the game, there's only going to be one of those colours left. So there's so much narrative to this particular game. As good as Sydney have been, I think it's easy to forget. It's actually been 12 years since they've won a premiership. When Malcheski kicked that goal to sink Hawthorn in 2012, one of the best grand finals that I've seen and one of the most enjoyable that I've watched as a neutral. That was 12 years ago now. And I'm aware that, a lot of fans who support clubs, they go through a lot longer premiership droughts than that. On the other hand, as an Eagles fan, 2006 to 2018, that felt like a lifetime. So this is still a big opportunity for Sydney, of course, and they've lost a few grand finals along the way. And for Brisbane, it's been 21 years, and in the patch in the middle there, I don't know the exact timeline, but I want to say the post-Voss era to eventually when Fagan took over, it was bleak. And there was, they were kind of considered a bit of a rabble, and they were being talked about as needing support. And I don't know if many people would have considered the possibility that they would become a bit of a powerhouse from 2019 till present, really. They've been in the thick of finals, and that will be validated infinitely, really, by a premiership if they are so lucky to win it today. And it will more or less as well, underscore one of the best redemption stories we've seen in the modern era. There's been a few. Melbourne and Richmond, they went from being largely irrelevant clubs, dare I say it, for a long patch there. And if Brisbane and Fagan get it done today, that he etches himself alongside at least the 2017 version of Richmond. Obviously, they won 3 out of 4. It gets a little bit difficult to compare that, but I just mean in terms of the redemption itself. I have a lot of memories for both of these teams winning premierships previously. The first 2 grand finals I ever watched were 02 and 03, and Brisbane obviously beat Collingwood both of those years, and of course remember when Port beat them the following year after that. And even as a kid who was still getting into AFL, really, I was like 8 by September of 2002. I was still caught up in the magic of Grand Final Day, absolutely. And, obviously West Coast and Sydney have locked horns on Grand Final Day as well. But I even think of 2012 I think of that really vividly when Sydney beat Hawthorn. I'm pretty sure this is a real memory and not a constructed one, but I feel like at the end of the game there was a bit of a montage of Sydney players celebrating, Adam Goodes throwing his hands into the air, and that song Sweet Disposition by the Temper Trap played over the top of that. And I just remember for weeks afterwards, I was around 18 then, and I was in Abu Dhabi, and I remember, getting in a taxi to go do my driving lessons in September of that year or October of that year, and listening to that song and picturing it being Eagles players lifting their arms after the siren and being on the dais, and Luke Shuey getting awarded the Norm Smith medal. It's funny how that turns out. So there's a lot of magic in Grand Final Day. It's almost more enjoyable a lot of the time for fans that are not involved in the game. I've said this previously, but 2018, was really not an enjoyable game to be at. And even, I don't know how many Sydney and Brisbane fans would even bother clicking on this video, because, at least for me, while I love to soak up Grand Final week, and when West Coast are involved, I soak up all the anticipation. I love West Coast being at the centerpiece, or part of the centerpiece at least. But I think on Grand Final day, that's when the anxiety kicks in, and you're just like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready for this. Because that is the beauty of the Grand Final that makes it so magical, is that there are maybe not dire consequences, but there is a serious downside for your team being unsuccessful today. It hurts. It hurts so much if you care about football, which so many of us do, and I know that I care a lot, and the threat of heartbreak is so pronounced today for one of these teams. And on the other hand, it's going to be an amazing redemption story. I suppose both of these teams have lost the previous two grand finals. It's just so rich full of narratives. But that chance that it could end in heartbreak again is where all the adrenaline comes from. I really can't decide who I'm going for in this grand final personally. I have tipped Brisbane, and I've been unable to shake the feeling that they're going to win all week, which doesn't mean anything. If you follow just the tips this year, I wouldn't take that to heart at all. But I just weirdly have this belief that it's going to be Brisbane, and I feel very confident about it. That doesn't mean I'm necessarily going for them. There's reasons on both sides of the ledger to go for either side. First of all, there's a sad little Eagles fan part of me that wants to see if Chad Warner would leave Sydney if Sydney win the flag, so I'm kind of at least a little bit tempted to support Sydney in this grand final. I have a friend, Heath, who's a big Swans man that I know through True Footy. And I know, he's a young man who's been through a bit, and there's a part of me that really wants Sydney to win for him. I think he's in Europe at the moment, actually, so I'm curious to see where he's going to be watching this grand final from. Another good friend, Alex, who came through and supported the channel this year and really helped me with some marketing stuff this year. Big Brisbane Lions fan, would love to see him win it. He's probably watching it from Singapore. But my mind even goes to someone like a Jared Berry, right? So Jared Berry, prior to the 2016 draft, that was when he was drafted. I remember a bit of a video coming out about how he lost his mum to cancer and she passed away in Germany in a German hospital. And I remember being really struck by that story. And it made me, sort of have a distant liking and want to support someone like a Jared Berry. The crazy thing is, 12 weeks after that happened, my own mother passed away from cancer in a hospital in Germany. And I don't know if it's the same hospital. It could be, because it was kind of a specialist one. But it's kind of crazy how life works out like that. I don't think I made the realization of that happening, because I don't think I even knew my mum had cancer at that point. So naturally, I can't help but feel a bit of an affinity with Jared Berry. And I think it would just be beautiful for him to win a premiership, and I know how much that would mean to him. So I think I'm just going to let myself be happy whoever wins. Usually on Grand Final Day, you pick a team you want to win, and I suppose sometimes you don't know until the game starts. You really don't. Maybe I'll be going for the team that is behind at any given point, and when they kick a goal, and if they hit the front, maybe I'll switch teams, and you won't know until the dying stages, or at least I won't, which team I really want to win. But I think it would be great to see either team win it. This is the last year the Eagles will be the reigning non-Victorian premiers, so that's a little bit sad. One thing that I'll note, this hasn't been a particularly analytical last-minute preview or anything like that, but I watched a little bit of the parade, and I did really pick up on Lachie Neale's body language. When Rampy and he are holding up the trophy, and this, you shouldn't really read into this, but I just throw it out there. I just couldn't help but notice, Rampy looked a bit tense, which does not mean anything. That's not the part I'm going to focus on. But Lachie Neale just looked happy and relaxed, and it made me think, while both teams have some grand final experience now, I just got the vibe from Lachie Neale that, mentally, I think Brisbane are very well prepared for this grand final, having been through it 12 months prior. Which, you apply the same logic to Sydney as well, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Lachie Neale have a good game. By way of predictions, I did tip Brisbane by 2 points, I think, in the Just the Tips. I kind of want to change my Norm Smith prediction to Will Ashcroft. I've been thinking, Brisbane are probably going to slap the cuffs on Lachie Neale, you'd think. But it's a bit like Dacos with Ashcroft. I just don't know how they're going to stop him, and I just have no doubt he's going to play well. He's one of those players, just built a little bit different. So anyway, I've probably rambled enough. Just some final thoughts on Grand Final Day. I love this day. It's going to be awesome. Again, the one thing I miss out on is the pre-game build-up, but mine's going to look a little bit different. For the last time before I move to Australia, I'm going to be getting up at 4 to watch a game of footy. I'm going to live stream it. I'm going to do a video straight after the game as well. So my heart goes out to everyone who has a team in this grand final. Also, shout out to people who live in New South Wales and Queensland that support AFL primarily. I've been doing some traveling over the last 18 months, met so many people from those two states, a lot of Sydney-siders, a lot of Queenslanders, and one bloke actually asked me if AFL was popular. And so I just want to show some love for people who live in those states, are from those states, and are passionate AFL fans. I didn't think I cared until now, but I do. Good luck in this grand final. This could be... It could be the greatest day of your life. It wouldn't necessarily be the worst day of your life. If it is the worst day of your life, then you've probably had a pretty good life. But that's kind of the beauty of sport. You can it can hurt. It will hurt. But you can park it. But there is absolutely no reason you can't treasure a grand final win for the rest of your life. And I was thinking about 2018 before I hit record, and it made me a little bit emotional even thinking about it. So love this. As much as this channel gets really nerdy and analytical, underlying all of that is just a passion for the game of football and the moments and teams rising to the top and claiming glory. I can't wait to see it. I can't help but feel a sense of trepidation. I don't even support a team in this grand final, but it's going to be awesome. And I have no doubt it's going to be a good grand final. So let me know any thoughts you have, guys, in the comment section below, and I will see you later today for the live stream. Cheers.